It's very close to 5 a.m. Sorry, 5 p.m. So we can start this particular office hour. So I'm Professor Li Weiling. So my lab has 5 projects provided by, I guess, 3 students. So we are going to use this 1 hour to explain the 5 project, and then any question you can ask afterwards. So if we would spend, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes to 5 minutes or even shorter for the 5 project introduction as a starting point, that would be great. Who'd like to start, Nikita or Declan?
I'm assuming you have three, Nikita, in which case I'll just go through my one so you can do your three
Okay.
back to back.
Yeah, go for
Yes,
it.
fine.
Cool.
You,
All right.
you can share the screen if you like.
Let me make sure. Okay. Pitch. Should-
I guess you
Well,
basically yeah.
maybe Nikita, you like to, oh, Declan's back. You want to try again?
It froze up on you for a second? Yeah. You guys can see my screen?
Not yet.
No? Oh shit. Um, maybe. Here we go. How about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, cool. So hi everyone, I'm Declan. I'm working on one of the 5 projects within the lab. And particularly, I work with ultrasound, piezoelectric micromachined ultrasonic transducers specifically. So ultrasound in a very small form factor. We can transmit and receive ultrasonic pulses with these devices. And more or less, the project that I work on is using them for wearable devices specifically targeted towards neural stimulation and neural interfaces. Um, some of the Here we go. Just a little bit of a background on a PMUT, which is something that we talk about a lot in this lab, not just with this project, is that we have these ultrasonic transducers. They're individual little diaphragms on the scale of a couple hundred micrometers, down to even tens of micrometers, in diameter. And so we can transmit and receive ultrasound with these things in a process called pulse echo. We can use that to characterize lots of things, including the human skull, which is something that I'm working on right now. And then we can also use it to mechanically deform surfaces and materials like the brain to stimulate specific regions of the brain. Um, and so that is more or less the point of this particular project, is both using pulse echo to characterize different features of the skull and the brain itself, or just imaging, and then stimulation as well. Um, what this would look like specifically for you guys is I've done a bit of work setting up the procedures for these things already. Now we have a lot of PMUT devices in hand. What it would look like for you guys is likely putting together a couple, so PCBs, printed circuit boards, that we can then mount these PMUTs on, and then figuring out and going through a couple different experimental procedures with these devices, figuring out how to do pulse echo of the skull in multiple locations, figuring out how to transmit ultrasound through the skull, and constructively interfere at a target point to stimulate a specific location. Um, Lots of different applications for this, whether that's imaging, stimulation, etc. But yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I'm happy to continue to discuss the project after all of the summaries.
Maybe we could have a Q&A for this project. Otherwise, people may forget. Any question
Fair enough.
for this particular project you want to ask?
I have a project, or sorry, I have a question.
Yep.
Please.
Um, so I guess my question is like, what is the, I guess, general idea for the project? Because when I was reading the document, it said it was a bit different from like the actual video. Like the video said like fabrication and like 3D printing and stuff, but then the document seemed a little more um what's the word? Like software, I
Sure.
think, like
Um,
simulation and stuff.
So this is a sort of multifaceted project. There are lots of different things that can be done towards this culmination of a goal where we're actually providing a func or working with a functional device. On the there is lots of software end. The previous iteration or the previous group of master's students I had worked a lot in developing a GUI for a particular driving board that we use to drive the ultrasound transducers. But then there's a lot of 3D printing for building phantoms and other just experimental space stuff to enable lining the peanuts up with the skulls, etc. As well as even the bio side of keeping a skull healthy and suitable, close enough to what it would be like in vivo, to be accurate enough to show that we're working with a skull that would represent a real human skull in your head. Um, so there are lots of different directions that the project can go in, if that's if that answers your question.
Okay, so it's like we would be able to decide what part we would want to do.
We would come together because there's teams of 3 to 5 students. We would come together and work out a couple different directions that are targeted towards individuals' backgrounds, etc.
Mhm.
Like if we have a couple bioengineers, they can work on one thing versus a couple electrical engineers or mechanical may be grouped into slightly different tasks working towards that same goal.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
I have a couple questions. Um, so we would be testing this on a 3D printed skull. Are we actually doing brain stimulation with it, or is it just that we're using the skull to like look at how the ultrasound interacts with it and like get through it?
So not only we work with both 3D printed skulls and an ex vivo human skull. I do have an actual skull that we work with as well. Um, and then a lot of the main we use the skulls for a couple different things. One is characterization, so that you can do localization of the PMUT arrays. They can do these pulse echo readings of the skull and figure out where they are on your head. It is particularly important for a wearable device. Depending on where you put it, it needs to know where it is to hit the correct location in your brain. Um, but then also transmitting through the skull and still being able to steer your ultrasound into the correct location. You need to characterize the skull to be able to do that as well.
Thank
So
you.
did that answer your question? Sorry,
Yeah, I guess I was kind of asking because I thought that part of it was trying to do brain stimulation and then get feedback from that. Um, but the project we'll be working on is characterizing the skull, right?
the brain stimulation is also very relevant. So as of right now, we do not work with any um, ex vivo cells or in vivo cells. Like we're not actively working with any living material. And so our placeholder for brain stimulation is making sure that we can deliver sufficient pressure that's been demonstrated to stimulate the brain in other in vivo demonstrations. So right now, we don't actually work with anything living. We just need to deliver enough pressure to know that we would be able to stimulate something living as of right now. There are possible collaborations for in vivo work for actual brain stimulation coming up, but not active quite yet.
That makes sense. I guess the way we would verify that is we would compare whatever readings we're getting to like actual stimulation experiments. Do we have standards for that we would be comparing to like online papers, or would we be comparing that to previous experiments that you guys have done, other people have done?
The literature predominantly.
Okay.
We haven't done in vivo demos within our lab space. That's always through collaboration so far.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. So will this be a publishing paper, or I is there like a IRB
So
for this?
good question. I think that's a two-parter. In terms of publication, that really depends on the work. I've put out we've put out papers involving this work already, and if we can make sufficient progress towards a relatively novel goal or accomplishment, then it's absolutely publishable. And then in terms of IRB, it depends on what we're working with. IRB becomes relevant when you're working with volunteers or anything living, etc. We have not yet needed IRB approval for anything within this project because we haven't worked with volunteers or in vivo anything, any living animals, etc. But that could be relevant in the future.
Okay, so right now it's just like a fake brain, or
Yes.
dead. Okay, got it.
Real skull, but the skull is not alive, so you don't need IRB for that.
Got it. Thanks.
Hi,
Hey, Declan. My bad. You got it, Donovan. You got it.
oh, thank you. I just had a quick question about so I'm a material science student and just kind of wondering like what would you expect out of somebody coming out of material science on this project?
Good question. I could think of a couple things. The first things that come to mind for me specifically would be phantom development, especially if we were working with phantom brains in particular. One of the difficulties with ultrasound is trying to image activation within the brain, because ultrasound has a relatively large wavelength that doesn't interact with particularly small features. And so instead, what you look at are things like ion gradients, et cetera, within the brain, and you can potentially see how that would influence ultrasound propagation, reflection, et cetera. So the first thing that comes to mind would be potentially working with a variety of materials with different ion concentration gradients, transfer rates, et cetera, to see if we could come up with something to enable us to provide some phantom for the ion flow within a brain itself. And there are lots of other things. The mechanical properties of a skull, we work with a real skull because it's really hard to make phantoms of it. But we could look at what the acoustic attenuation is coming through the skull at different frequencies, et cetera. That becomes very material science relevant as well. Lots of directions we could take it.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Declan, how's it going? I was just wondering, like, I came in a minute late, so I'm sorry if I missed this, but how does this technology differ from, I guess, what other people are trying to do in the industry? And also, I guess, like, how far along are you guys with this project in terms of like the total scope?
I think the main difference is the fact that one, we're using these piezoelectric micromachined ultrasonic transducers. They're a much smaller form factor than anything in literature or in any startup that I'm aware of either. They're all using bulk piezoelectrics. And so there are a couple benefits with PMUTs. I could take more time than we have to talk about that, but more or less they're small. So we can do much denser sampling with imaging, et cetera, and high resolution steering. In terms of how far along we are, we have this device. We have one device in particular. I've put couple papers have been published on already. We've demonstrated that it can deliver sufficient pressure, et cetera. As of now, we're just trying to figure out other additional demonstrations that we can perform with the devices that we have available, and sort of develop it into a cohesive unit that is capable of doing everything that we want it to be able to do, whether that's, steering from multiple locations simultaneously, et cetera, targeting anywhere within the brain, and even doing some basic imaging from within the brain as well. So those are those sort of ongoing things that we're working on.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Which
Okay,
I don't know, for the sake of time, if I should.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
we probably should move to Nikita.
Yeah.
So you can
Thank
share, Nikita, you can share. During the time for all the project, we do have a potential interest going to something like start company if the project goes well. Nikita?
Yeah, that's right. So, you guys can see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So I guess to introduce a little bit about the lab, we have a lot of PhD students, we have some postdocs, a lot of undergrads, and last year we actually had 12 master students. And so these are some of the photos of our lab. And so my project, the first one that I'll talk about, and then we can ask some questions, involves using 3D imaging sensors. So you probably use one to open up your phone. There's one on the Waymos and SF. And well, humanoid robots are actually supposed to be using these to be able to perceive the environment in 3D, and the market is supposed to be quite large. So 3D imaging is already widely applied in the industry. You basically have it in all sorts of devices, lots of companies, in addition to our industry sponsors, which are listed here. And all these devices that do 3D imaging all use concepts related to what we'll be using in our project, which is called compressed sensing. And there's actually a company that got spun out of Berkeley, and we're looking to basically ride on the same legacy. So we're using these basically ultrasound pixels in this project, and we actually can beamform with them and space them and send different signals. And so you guys will be able to make PCBs with these elements and as well as program them. There's lots of simulation work you can do. You can play around with different kinds of arrays. And the idea is we want to simulate with ultrasound instead of using LiDAR. And the clear advantage is basically ultrasound can actually be quite cheap compared to LiDAR. And actually, one of last year's teams, this team of master students, undergrads, and a PhD that helped out a lot with the project, actually worked together to make a PCB. And this PCB altogether was able to actually collect signal, transmit and collect signal, and be able to form 3D images of the environment. And it was able to do all these things with these things that we were actually not able to do with our old setup on the bench to the left. And so you could hold it in your hand, and the idea with this project overall is you'll have opportunities to do PCB design, use AI and signal processing, and be able to work with these sensors on robots. And the idea with this project is it has a lot of commercial opportunity. And so the project essentially is to work on a minimum viable product that you can later use to try to get money for basically like seed funding. So I guess we can open up to some questions for this project before we move on to the others.
Sorry, which project is this?
This is the Intelligent Imaging Systems project.
Okay, do you know which number that was?
No idea.
Okay.
If you control F on the spreadsheet, you could probably find my name or Professor Lin's name, and you'll see the project number.
I think it's 175.
Okay, thanks.
I can hop on here. So, Nikita, you mentioned that previously, like the students had built that custom PCB. Um, I guess like what direction would you be looking for us to take in this next year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the PCB that the students built last year is basically like a very first kind of experimental prototype. And it works. So we're able to use 8 elements to both transmit and receive. But just like with any sort of like first prototype, there's lots of improvements that can be made. So one of those improvements that's blatantly obvious, and I can go back to this slide, is basically making the whole set of electronics smaller in addition to making the board cheaper. So those two things can immediately make the device basically much more practical. Another thing that students this year can work on is making it so that we can actually do the reconstruction on the board itself. So the dirty secret about this project right now is we actually use a GPU separately on like a different computer to do the reconstruction. We haven't actually tried to get the reconstruction to be done on the board itself, but it's completely possible. And so this year, students can work on basically making everything happen on this one device, in addition to making the PCB smaller, improving it, and packaging it. Because as you can see, it's just like two boards on top of one another in this device that we basically hold in like an iPhone fixture for taking photos.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Cool. So if there are no more questions, I can move on to the next project, which is basically using wearable devices to monitor health. And this one involves doing involves us having IRB. So we're actually going to do experiments in volunteers. So a lot of you guys probably have one of these devices, if you're not actually wearing it right now. And a lot of these devices actually, over the more recent generations, have had a lot more kind of biosensing capabilities. The new AirPods that I'm actually wearing right now actually have the ability to sense heart rate. And so what you're seeing is basically this sort of industry trend for lots of wearable devices to have more and more things that can measure um, bio biosignals, and these can essentially act as some sort of preventative medicine signal. So you can spot things early, you can monitor your health, and people generally like these things. Um, Basically, last year's team worked on the very first prototype, just like with the previous project, of a wearable device to be able to track sweat, the contents of your sweat on a device like the Apple Watch. So as you can see in the photo on the left that they took on the table, there's a display screen, a custom PCB, battery, as well as the actual sensor that we harvested from an Apple Watch. And so this prototype device that you can see on the bottom right on one of their arms basically shows what it looks like when it's being worn. And the whole idea with this project, and here are some of the students that were on the project, they basically designed this PCB, got it to be programmed, and got it to be able to detect very basic signatures within your sweat, such as your hydration level, the sweat concentration, as well as things that we're trying to target this year, such as glucose. So this year's students for this project are basically going to continue basically finalizing this device. And then we're going to start to look forward to conducting experiments on people. We'll collect these experiments from people, basically just volunteers, such as undergrads in the lab, maybe even you guys. And what we'll do is we'll basically just do some signal processing around this and be able to split the signal that we get from the sweat into this constituents and be able to figure out exactly what's going on with your body live. The idea is, for example, in sweat, there's glucose. People that are diabetic basically track their glucose with basically a sort of invasive style where they basically prick their finger or they have a wearable glucose sensor. And the idea is if we're able to separate the glucose signal from the overall sweat signal good enough, we can actually have a form of a non-invasive way of sensing glucose that doesn't actually require finger pricking. And so this project also has opportunity for a minimum viable product, as you can already tell. There's a touchscreen, you have a PCB, it's a wearable device, and we just need to finalize the signal processing and do clinical trials. So we can open up this project to questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, I guess I have a. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Some other person screaming now.
I guess I had a couple of questions. One being what I had asked earlier about how a material science student, like what to expect from a material science student. But I guess also like what would be like the week by like would there be like a week by week um kind of updates or like what's the structure of the project?
Yeah, those are good questions actually. So I think on the surface, this project doesn't seem appealing to anyone that did material science or chemistry, but there's actually quite a lot of underlying theory that we use in this project that somebody who studied material science or chemistry would be able to take advantage of. So fundamentally, we're measuring the contents of the sweat using electrochemistry. So redox potentials, basically like diffusion, convection, all of these processes that you basically learn as like side concepts in material science curriculum are all actually used in being able to measure exactly what's inside of the sweat. Additionally, we're working on making a sensor. So the sensor needs to be able to be stable in like a on like a human skin environment, which means that there's like a lot of sweat, a lot of corrosion. And so not every material actually is fit for the job. If you use something like a iron as an electrode, the iron will just rust. But in this case, what we're doing is we're using gold. And gold was like a purpose like a was an on-purpose material choice to make sure that we wouldn't have a sensor corrode and change and age as we're doing these experiments. There's definitely a lot more room to be able to improve the sensor material and the sensing method. And both of these topics are can be improved basically from like a material science or chemistry background. The second question for the week by week updates is a good one too. So last year I did meetings every week, but the master students got pretty busy pretty quick. At the start of the year, you guys have a lot of time. You guys have a lot of different kinds of things going on. It's a really exciting time. And then very quickly, do your classes actually get really busy. You got a lot of homework, you got group projects, all of these things. And so you're bogged down a lot. So this year I'm basically making meetings every 2 weeks. If you want them every week, that's totally fine. More often doesn't really matter to me. And the meetings will basically look like the following. So I mentioned a few things that we can do basically more immediately in the project, such as basically packaging everything in this device so that we can start doing human trials. In order to be able to do human trials, we also need to make sure that everything basically works. So that means making the software work, making sure that we can actually detect things that are inside of the sweat. So week by week or every 2 weeks, we kind of just break things down into tangible steps in addition to essentially what else can be done outside of the technical work. And that's basically how I roll with these projects.
I had a question about the scope of the project. So on the, I guess like the list of projects that was released to us, when I was reading your document, it mentioned a lot about like the robotic system that's going to be used to, I guess, like help with the different measurements. But then here you were kind of talking more about the development of the actual wearable. So I'm just curious as to if we'll be focusing on like one of them or both of them or like what's going on there.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So basically, when we are calibrating this sensor, you actually do use a robot basically to titrate different sweat concentrations onto the sensor. So there is like a robotic aspect of this where we're basically calibrating the sensor. And that's actually something that I forgot to mention in this call right now. So yeah, there will be a robotic element. We actually had one of the students last year, D, basically program a lot of the robot. He got it working. He 3D printed a whole bunch of things. And if you decide to get a tour of our lab later, or if you reach out to me, I can actually show you what. So the robot side of the project is basically where we have the sensor ready, we have the device ready, and we're looking to just characterize the device. So the robot basically titrates the sensor with all sorts of different kinds of sweat environments. And because we know exactly what we put on the sensor, we know what the ground truth is, and we know what the measurement is. So from there, what we do is we have this calibrated sensor from the robot, and then we just do the human trials where we basically then see how the human sweat looks like, and we kind of remap these domains to make sure that everything looks good.
Okay, so is this more like on the software side of things at this point? It's like given that like the hardware is kind of developed, or are we also going to be trying to develop the hardware further?
Both sides. So it's sort of intertwined because we're working with low-level hardware like PCBs. You're always going to be, even though you're going to be coding, you're always going to be working with hardware to an extent.
Sounds good.
Hey,
I had a question. Oh,
oh, go for it.
Jack, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I had a quick question. My background is like kind of in wearable development, specifically like glucose monitors. But I'm also, and I'm have been more historically like a test engineer, but I'm kind of interested in a little bit more of the signal processing. Would there be opportunity to do like both kind of the device design and the trials as well as some of the signal processing, or we more have to pick one and work on that?
Yeah, totally. You can basically do everything if you want to do everything.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, jumping off the back of what you said earlier about even like if you're working on software, you'll have to work with a little bit of hardware. I come from like a sort of purely software kind of standpoint, and I've like worked at like sort of the interface there between like human and AI interaction. And so I was curious, for like, first of all, like, um, what exactly is entailed in like biomedical software design? Like, do you have like a rough understanding of what kind of an interface are you looking for? And also, for someone who is primarily software oriented, what kind of hardware sort of opportunities do you see being meaningful with the project?
So we're mainly focused on the science, I would say. So the goal on my side is a paper. The goal on your side is experience with like these kinds of project in this kind of field, um, as well as kind of what can come out of the project itself. So on the software side of things, for me, all I'm looking for is something where like we can basically reliably collect data. Um, the software doesn't fail. So this can be uh, a user interface because we have a touchscreen, as simple as like a start stop button that while the experiment's happening, we just can see the signal. So we can just monitor whether what signal we're collecting looks good. Um, and so in that regard, if you want to take the software further or you want to take some level of the signal processing further, that's you can fully immerse yourself in that. And then I forget the second part of what you asked.
I was just asking, for someone who's primarily software oriented, what kind of hardware opportunities do you think would be like meaningful and like in the purview of this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, if you're somebody that's software oriented and you want to see how you can gain stuff from the hardware, so kind of like on an earlier point, you'll basically be programming two things. A robot to collect data And then the second thing is the PCB that's actually on the wearable device. So when you're programming a PCB, on one hand, there is like the touchscreen app that you're programming. On the second hand, there is also the sensor that you have to interface with. That means that you have to be able to read the data sheet. You have to be able to program the settings into the sensor properly. You have to make sure that all of these things on a very low level, like making sure that all the basically registers in the chip's settings are properly set. So you will get experience working with the hardware down to like the chip documentation for the wearable device. And then for the robot, it'll also be a combination of lower and higher level software programming where basically you'll be programming also a microcontroller that moves stepper motors the same way that a 3D printer has a microcontroller and stepper motors. And in addition to that, there's also basically a Python program that interfaces with an oscilloscope, a Python program that interfaces with some other things that we have on the robot itself that we made that you can basically orchestrate together. And D actually did a lot of this stuff. So you'll basically be able to get a lot of hardware programming experience rather than basically just being stuck to a desk coding something that's not really tangible. The project is very tangible.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then I'll probably just continue with the next project, and then we can ask questions for that. So the third one uses superconducting, is basically working on superconductors. So for those of you that are into robotics, especially research robotics, you'll find that there's actually quite a lot of different kinds of robots that are being made experimentally. Where you have this field of soft robotics, where you have robots made out of inflatable materials, and they're actually trying to make a humanoid out of them. And then you also have concepts such as like magnetic robots that have applications in surgery. So for those of you that are interested in materials and chemicals, we actually made superconductors in our lab from scratch. And this is a photo of some old results. We have some newer results. And the idea is the following. As AI is getting better, there's a lot of startups that are doing AI for science. And so the idea is instead of just having human scientists experiment and try to come up with new materials, you can use AI systems to be able to explore the data to be able to help predict new materials. And there's actually some papers that have come out that have shown that this is successful. So we want to be able to ride on this kind of wave. And instead of actually making the new room temperature superconductor, which is like the holy grail in this field, we're interested in basically applying superconductors into mechanical systems so that when superconductors become practical, we basically showed as the first set of people that you can actually already use them in mechanical systems and robotic systems. And so this project is more of like a scientific kind of experimentation project. Essentially, what you'll be doing is you'll be making some superconductors in our lab, characterizing them. We have a guy that I reached out to that actually is in a material science lab that can help us a lot with the characterization. And in addition to that, there's a lot of theory and simulations that you can do to work on basically figuring out how we can mechanically levitate and control these superconductors, the same way how we can control magnets on a levitating magnetic array. A lot of these electronics that you'll be programming, such as like electromagnetic coils or motor coils, will require understanding how high power electronics work because these coils do get hot when we play around with them. In addition to programming the microcontrollers that will essentially control them, there's also other kinds of concepts that I haven't listed on here, such as like cryogenics controls that you can basically apply to this project to be able to properly control these superconductors and move them around with some feedback. Um, does anyone have any questions for this project?
Yeah, I have a question. So, going into this project, what level of background in material science are you guys looking for?
Zero. I have two mechanical engineering undergrads working on the project with me, and they're doing just fine.
What would you do as a mechanical engineer in this project?
Yeah, I would say this project is actually better suited for mechanical engineers. So for the most part, most of the materials are synthesized, and there are some steps remaining that we can do, but they don't require a material science background because they're fairly well laid out, they're well characterized. And actually, if you watch Nile Red on YouTube, he made a video where he made a superconductor, and we follow a similar procedure for one of our synthesis. So this is something that you can like follow a YouTube tutorial on how to do. Most of the work is work that mechanical engineers and actually electrical engineers have more experience in. So This means basically we are trying to levitate the superconductors and move them around using electromagnets. You'll have to 3D print fixtures for the magnets, for the electromagnets, and you'll also probably make a PCB or work with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis to control relays and circuits to be able to turn these coils on and off and be able to control the motion of the superconductor. So to be able to, for example, get feedback for the motion from the superconductor, you can put a camera in front of the levitating platform, and you can actually use like a library like OpenCV to track the motion of the superconductor, and then feed that back to the Raspberry Pi that can talk to an Arduino that can then change the signal that's being supplied to the electromagnets to move the superconductor in like a feedback-like manner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What sort of deliverables are we looking at for
Sorry?
this project? What sort of deliverables are we looking at for this project? Like at the end of fall and end of the year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, what I'm really aiming at right now is basically being able to uh, move these superconductors in ways where we can just demonstrate some basic robotic motion. So we're already able to levitate them and move and push them left and right with static electromagnets. What we'd like to basically demonstrate is basically like swarm motion, so we can control multiple of these superconductors simultaneously. We can potentially outfit the superconductors in like a heater and a cooler so that we can basically control when they're levitating and when they're not levitating. So the deliverables are a little bit more abstract for this project, but they're more open-ended. And the reason why I make them more open-ended is because of the fact that it's actually not clear what these devices can do or not do because the science is still new.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah.
Did you go over like potential applications for this project?
Yeah, so the applications for this project are actually not going to be um, directly meaningful to any of us kind of like in the short term. The 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 things that you can take out of this project are basically being able to work with cryogenic materials, cryogenic systems, as well as like high-powered systems. So although you're working with superconductors, which at the moment aren't very practical because they require basically very low temperatures to be able to levitate, the practical things that you can gain from this project is basically working with cryogenic systems and these high-powered systems, which you'll find commonly on all sorts of different kinds of scientific instruments, such as like quantum computers, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Developing a manufacturing process for the material on the robots, and you said that you have already done some experiments on that and some fabrication. So I'm just curious, if, like in the larger sense of the lab project, what kind of stage you're in and what prior work has been done.
Yeah, so in the current stage of the lab project, we've demonstrated some basic lateral motion. So we have some basic 3D printed like fixtures to be able to cool the superconductor, place it on a bed of magnets, and then push it around side to side. And so we have one type of superconductor finished. The second kind of superconductor that we're almost done with is basically like a melt textured material. So it'll be like a single crystalline material, and that'll have basically different superconducting properties than the current one that we have. The current one that we have basically acts like a monopole. So magnets typically have like two poles, a north and a south pole. The superconductor that we have acts like a monopole. So it kind of is always being repelled, but it's being repelled differently than a magnet would typically be repelled. So it's being repelled basically as a function of like the magnetic field gradient. The new superconductor that we're trying to get finished, and you guys can be part of the process, is one that's single crystal seeded. So we'll take basically the powder that we've already made, compress into a pellet, put it inside of an oven with a seed crystal on top of it at around like 1060 degrees Celsius, and we'll have that heat up for around 3 days. And so we'll have the whole material kind of recrystallize. And so it comes from this like single seed source. After that, what we do is we'll basically put it in the tube furnace, blow it through oxygen at around 900 degrees, or sorry, 600 degrees Celsius for this time. And what we'll basically have it do is basically reoxygenate. This new material, the new version of this superconductor, will basically be able to like flux pin lock. So it'll be able to hold its orientation And so this can also result in kind of like new demonstrations that aren't very clear yet because we just haven't played around with it. The same way how the current superconductor, its behaviors weren't very clear until we played around with it, and now we have a better idea of how to play with it. There's actually not any prior work in trying to manipulate superconductors in 3D like this before. So that's why this project is a little bit more abstract, because there are a lot of projects that do use magnets and control magnets and try to show that these magnetic robots can be controlled in swarms and they can do different tasks. And magnets are a well-characterized thing. Superconductors in this case actually aren't. So the work is a little bit more abstract, but there are some things that we definitively know they can do, such as basically like locking their position when they're frozen in this state, as well as being repelled from other materials. So these are some things that we can play around with and get started with. And then as you guys also join the project and play around with these materials more, as well as basically play around with the electromagnets, it'll become more tangible what's practical and what's not practical to demonstrate. And in doing so, we can basically lay out like a plan, just like we do with every other project on this call.
Is there potential for publications coming out of this?
Of course, yeah, this project is like very much like a research project.
Okay, maybe we should move to the final project by Mustafa.
Yeah, let's get started. All right. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. You still see my screen, right? The slideshow.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Mustafa. I'm a fourth year PhD student in Professor Lee Whitland's group. And yeah, I have a cool project that we've been looking at for a while, and I think is might be interesting to hopefully a lot of you. And the main idea here is we are trying to develop sort of a more advanced type of hearing aid with PMUTs. So if you've joined a little bit later, you don't know what a PMUT is. A PMUT is a piezoelectric micro machined ultrasonic transducer. What that is you can imagine a really thin membrane that vibrates at ultrasonic frequencies. And then you can do a lot of really interesting and cool applications with such a device. The only problem is this is a really small device. So you can imagine, if you want to use something like this for a hearing aid, and like I said, it's an ultrasonic transducer, so it's not immediately clear how you would use an ultrasonic transducer for a hearing aid, right? Like if you think about this, the whole idea of ultrasound is you can't really hear it. So the cool thing that we've been exploring in a different application, and I can give you guys a little bit of a glimpse on that application that we've explored before, and it's been quite interesting, is you can modulate your ultrasonic signal. And with that, you can get into you can have a signal that's sort of more directed, and you can imagine like a laser beam of sound that goes directly into your ear. So we've been exploring something like this for a different application, but in general, for a hearing aid, the way this is really interesting is you can really focus the sound into your ear, into the eardrum, so there's a lot less noise into your ear when you're using that hearing aid, and it's also a lot more responsive because the typical hearing aids use an electromagnetic speaker, and you can imagine this has a lot more inertia compared to a PMUT. So the delay between, whatever the microphone that picks up the signal and the speaker that outputs that signal into the ear is a lot less. Now, the cool thing about all of this is, let's say we do have a PMUT, let's say we were able to drive it and put it in a compact enough package to fit into your ear, and we drive that at an ultrasonic frequency, you focus the signal, everything's good. The signal is still not high enough. The volume is not high enough, and then that's another interesting facet of this project is we would like to increase that volume, or we'd like to increase that amplitude at the eardrum. without increasing the power or increasing the device's size. And the idea with this is we develop these sort of interesting shaped acoustic horns. So you can imagine, if you're like, calling out to your friend or something and you do this with your hands, you try to make your voice a little bit higher. The amplitude of of the sound wave coming out of your mouth gets a little bit higher, and then they can hear you. So that's a similar idea, and we use some machine learning algorithms, a lot of optimization to be able to do this with a lot of numerical methods. So let me maybe give you a quick overview on what that looks like. We have these types of interesting horn shapes that we've designed. So we've done previous work on, optimizing these horn shapes for some for a higher amplitude. And then we figured, how about we try to use this for sound waves? We haven't used this for hearing aids yet. That's hopefully where you all can help us figure out. But the idea is we develop these horns, we put them on these PMUT devices, and then we want to use them into applications. So let me show you a quick application that we've been exploring for this. We've had these, I'm not sure if you've seen like the Ray-Ban Metas, if you've tried those before. They're quite loud. If you are sitting like on a bus or something, the person sitting next to you would be able to hear it if you crank up the volume a little bit. And that is primarily because of that electromagnetic speaker, again, that sort of vibrates and outputs sound everywhere. With these, alternatives is these PMUT speakers with a directional output. So you can imagine you can directly modulate that sound into with an acoustic horn. It's modulated, so it's an ultrasonic signal. Nobody around you can be able to hear it because it's an ultrasonic signal. It's modulated, so it only targets your eardrum. The cool thing, this is a sort of a side thing that I thought was interesting. I've seen this post on that a few months ago on excuse me, on Google for ultrasonic. It says sensing gear, but if you read the description, it's kind of clear to what direction they might be exploring for such a for their wearable devices. So I thought that was interesting. This is an ongoing project, but you can imagine the idea for that is very similar. So you can get a sense. The reason I'm showing these slides is you can get a sense of the type of work that you would be doing with such a project. Now, the way I can show you some a little bit more details here. We developed these PCBs. We developed this whole glasses frame and all the horn design in there. With such a PCB device, you can imagine this has all been designed by me and a couple of other undergrads that have been working with me in this project over the past few months. And so we designed these PCBs, we put them in these devices, and then the way we test them is we have these they call them binaural heads. So these are these freaky little devices or these 3D printed heads that we build, and you can see the ears here are flexible. And they have these little grooves at the back where you can fit microphones to be able to characterize, sort of like how this device would sound, essentially. And this is sort of what our sort of design looks like in reality. Yeah, so without further ado, let me just outline a few quick skills and potential challenges you can anticipate working on such a project. The way I think about this is it's sort of split into three main facets. The first is hardware and prototyping. You can imagine you want to build this, frame for this hearing aid. You want to make it compact. You want to make something small and small enough to fit into your ear and not be too bulky and uncomfortable to wear. Because the whole idea of this project is to make something comfortable that is, a little bit lower noise, can make the person wearing it a lot more comfortable. The second part of this is the optimization and numerical methods. So we want to sort of develop these, interesting horn designs to be able to fit within this package. To be able to maximize that volume. And then obviously the third part is the electronics and the signal processing. You want to, modulate that signal coming out of that actuator. You want to characterize what the microphone signal looks like. You want to build these PCBs and design them as well in a small and compact package. So yeah, so if any of this seems interesting to any of you, if any of you is interested in consumer electronics like I am, that might be a cool project to work on. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Sorry, I think I might have misunderstood something based on what I read, but are we going to be developing like an actual hearing aid that goes in your ear, or is it going to be these glasses with the hearing aid built into them?
Sorry. Um, No, it'll be the actual hearing aid. The device, the glasses there are just an example of a previous project that I've one of the ongoing projects that we've been working on. But it will be the actual hearing aid that you design and develop from scratch.
Gotcha.
I have a question. So for this project, are the student roles kind of more individual and specialized, or will there be opportunities for people to basically, I don't know, try out stuff from all aspects of the project? I'm asking this because I'm a mechanical engineer. I have a lot of background with hardware and prototyping, but I really want to get a lot more experience with electronics.
That's an excellent question, and it's one I've had in the past with the previous glasses project. So it's interesting when you're developing, like let's say you're building the packaging and the horn and everything else for the device itself. The only way you can actually build this is if you like collaborate very closely with the with the electronics, with the group whose core focus is electronics, right? So, and if you're not closely collaborating with them, then you're always designing the wrong thing, or you're not, if you don't have a good awareness and a good sense of what the specs of what they're working on is, it becomes quite challenging for you to be able to design a meaningful device. So what I've seen in the past with such a type of approach that sort of encompasses these three different types of main big facets is you would absolutely have some sort of core specialization, and then absolutely also need to have these sort of peripheral expertise and background to be able to get an idea of how the other devices work, the other facets work, so you can actually be able to achieve your own core specialization.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Question as well. I was curious about the like sort of software side of this project. Like, what exactly does that entail, and like, what are some of the things like students who'd be working on this project would do, like on the software side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you can imagine, you have a device that's vibrating quite quickly, in ultrasonic frequencies, and you would like to develop these types of integrated horns to fit into the hearing aid package, right? Because you want to increase the volume of that hearing aid as much as you possibly can. So that entails you being able to develop a working model for such a device. We do have some existing ones that we've been working on. They can use a lot more improvement. So that's sort of the numerical methods aspect of this, and that's pretty much all code. The second aspect of this is the optimization. So there is a lot of cool tricks and cool things to learn there with either convex or non-convex optimization. If you can figure out a convex solution to such a problem, then that's I'd be quite shocked, and I think we would all be very happy. But you can imagine there's a lot of optimization work to be done there. Then again, that's all software, that's all code. And then there is also bridging that gap, sort of like the question that Hudson asked, where if you're like a software person and you want to bridge the gap into CAD, there absolutely needs to be that handshake where you develop this, you go into all the details, but then you need to be able to build to design something that's buildable, given all the constraints and what the prototyping focus has. So if you're prototyping this and you're trying to 3D print something, or you're trying to build it in some way or the other, you need to be able to have all these constraints in the back of your head when you're designing this and building all these constraints into your software for that optimizer.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So I actually had a question on how involved we would be with like interfacing with these PMUT devices. So I think this is the first project, because there's a few other projects, right, that involve these PMUTs. I noticed that there was an ADC on board the PCB. I'm assuming that's going to interface with the PMUT device, but I was still wondering if there's any more optimization or design work related to interfacing with the PMUTs. And maybe after you share your opinions, I'd love to hear from Declan and Nikita too, if they're on the call. Maybe each project's requirements on like sampling the PMUTs might be different, or how to drive it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a excuse me, that's an excellent question. within the realm of this project, I would say the way you interface with the device is pretty much like up to you. You need to be able to give it some sort of signal. The way this is challenging from a design perspective is you would like to give it a modulated signal. So not only are you giving it a certain frequency, it's modulated as well, and you're building the whole device with a microphone. So you need to have some sort of way to be able to pick up a signal from a microphone, give that, take that modulated, give it to your PMUT, and that's how you sort of interface with your PMUT, and that all needs to be done at a very low power. And you don't want to run out of battery in like a few minutes. So there is that aspect of it, and then the other aspect is um, um, uh, uh, picking the actual device. So we do have quite a few PMUTs in our lab that either previous lab mates have built in the clean room, or other ones that we've partnered with industry to use. And picking it is also quite challenging because you would need different constraints and different constraints and different ways to drive these different PMUTs. Because let's say you have a multi-channel PMUT, for example. In that case, then you're driving it at different. You have many small membranes that you would like to drive each at their own, maybe to beamforming or something else. So all these ideas are all valid, and I think that is sort of the design space from that project's perspective. I think Declan and Nikita may give you other ideas. They've also built like really interesting PCBs for different applications, but within the realm of this project, I would say this would sort of entail what you're asking.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for answering.
Yeah.
I guess we only have 5 minutes or 4 minutes left, so we can open for all questions for all the project. But I just try to give you, from my perspective, overall scheme is that we try to assemble the team and then decide specific direction we can go, even though I think you kind of understand of each project, what's the general, I would say, eventual goal. Okay. But we only have a year, or not even a year, 9 months for the capstone project. So we have to determine the potential milestone eventually for 9 months. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you probably interact with the student that is in charge of the project more than with me. But I typically arrange a bi-weekly meeting with each capstone team. But for example, during the midterm final period, you can just send me email, say you guys are busy, we don't need to meet if there's no extra things. And also our lab actually have this weekly seminar, typically Friday and noon. You are all invited to participate. And also, whenever you feel you have something good to show, you're welcome to present. So that's the general information from my side. Any other question? We only have maybe 2+ minutes left.
Oh, is Declan still on the call?
Yes, Declan is.
Okay. I just had a question real quick about the ultrasonic wearable project. Um, so the goal of the project is to use ultrasound to explore interactions with the nervous system for like brain, like anatomy imaging. Is there also like any potential for brain function imaging using ultrasound, like an MEG or EEG would do, or is it mainly just like anatomy imaging?
Good question. So for a quick point, we're not only doing imaging, we do also do brain stimulation, but imaging is definitely something that we're exploring. That is, imaging activity with ultrasound is difficult. I would love to continue to read into it and find an avenue for us to potentially explore it. It's something that really has not been demonstrated in the slightest. So that's one of those that if we as a team could come together and figure out a potential avenue to try, if we were able to demonstrate it even at a very introductory level, could be the making of a very strong deliverable. So I can't guarantee that it's something that we would be super successful in doing, but if we can come together and figure out a route to try it, would certainly be a nice direction to go in.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Final question, Michelle?
Yeah, I have a question. So this meeting is being recorded. Will you be able to send us the link to the recording afterwards?
Yes. I'm recording this, so I will also post this, I guess, from the website. You got the meeting information. And also, if you need to ask specific student-specific question about the specific project, and you cannot find their contact information, you can always contact me first, and I could lead you to the right student.
Okay, thank you.
Good. So I will conclude the meeting for now. And if you have an actual question, feel free to continue discussion through email. That'll be it for everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.